Go.
Got it. Happy New Year, everybody. Welcome to the party. Party hasn't changed. So for those of you who have been here before, you know who I am. If you're my patient, you know who I am. But for those of you who could be new or are not my patient, I am Dr. Timothy Leichliter. I am a neurologist at Allegheny Health Network that specializes in movement disorders. And I'm here to talk to you and answer questions about Parkinson's disease. That's generally at the end of the day how this goes. And so the best way to send in your questions or comments or concerns is to type them in the chat box. So I got some emailed to me already, but after I go through the email ones, I'll go through the chat box one and I'll just answer questions as they come in. So if you think of questions, type them in that section over there. The few caveats that I always tell people at the beginning of this talk is one, this is not a great place to get individualized care or treatment. The questions aren't great if you say, hey, I'm on this and this, what do you think I should do next? I would say you should really talk to your doctor about that. And a common theme in my world is have good communication with your doctor, which I know is easier said than done, including if that doctor is me. Two is everything you hear today is my opinion. I am one lowly person on the totem pole. I like to think everything I tell you is based on scientific knowledge, data, as good as I can find. But sometimes there isn't data to back up what I'm saying. And so sometimes I make stuff up. It's been known to happen. I will usually warn you when I'm making stuff up. But the long and short of it is you may go down the street and see a different neurologist or a different movement disorder specialist or a different doctor, and they may have a different opinion from me. That doesn't mean I'm wrong or right, or they're wrong or right. It means we all interpret things a little bit differently. And so since you're here and I get the podium, you get to hear my opinions. So again, feel free to type in some questions. I'll start with the ones that got emailed to me first. And then I'll go to the ones that you type in the box, and then hopefully we'll be relatively on time and go from there. All right. The first question is the question I think I've answered probably, I don't know when it showed on the Today Show, but at least probably 5 or 6 times every day since then. And I think was already typed in the chat box as well. And it was about the vibrating gloves. I'm not involved in the vibrating gloves. I am not part of the study or anything like that, but everybody saw the Today Show and everybody asked about it. I didn't see the Today Show, but I did go back and watch the clip and find out what they were talking about. Everybody is right. It looks very impressive. Okay. I think the idea, and from what I gathered from watching the videos and reading about it a little bit more, is it does use technology that sends messages from your fingertips up to your brain, more or less alters the signals that we think are causing some of the problems in Parkinson's disease, such as the tremors and the slowness of movement and the balance problems, gets that to a more normal firing pattern, thereby relieving the symptoms. I believe that's the idea, or that's my understanding for how it's kind of supposed to work. It looks like it's been trialed in about 6 people. It looks like they were having good results, and all of that is very promising. And I want to get excited just as much as you guys want to get excited. However, I am a very skeptical person by nature. Some have termed me somewhat negative. I like to think realistic more than negative, but you call it what you want. And so the short answer is I don't get excited until I can get my hands on this thing. And so it is still in clinical trials. It is not approved for anything yet. They really have to try it in more than just 6 people or 10 people before we get too excited about it. Interestingly enough, there are other wrist-worn devices that, particularly thinking about the Leichliter, that uses from what I gather, a similar idea where it sends impulses up to the brain and the basal ganglia and back down to control tremors. And so this is not entirely novel science, and there is some science to back up what they're doing. Again, if you think about what the deep brain stimulator does, that electrode in the brain does a similar thing, which is disrupts abnormal circuitry and firing patterns. And that's how we think it treats the symptoms of Parkinson's disease. And so there is a lot of scientific data to back up what they're doing. But as any of us who have followed, research trials and drug trials and uric acid trials, or all the things that we get really excited about, and then they do big trials in humans and randomized controlled studies, and then they don't work. And so I reserve my excitement until A, they start publishing on this data and we really see what the results are. B, it gets approved, and C, I can get my hands on it, then I will be much more excited. And so for now, it's more of just kind of keeping my fingers crossed, because I'm like you guys, any type of device that comes out, any type of novel medicine, novel supplement, I am all on board. If I can see some data that it works and I can get my hands on it and try it, I am just as excited as everybody else. Well, I'm sort of as excited as everybody else is, but I really keep my excitement in check until I get better data, more data, actual studies, and I get to play with it on my own. But as soon as that happens, you guys will all be the first people that or my patients or anybody that I talk to will be the first people that we talk about with it. And if it really does work as well as the videos show that it worked, you're going to be seeing a lot of use of it, because man, those videos were pretty powerful videos in showing the benefits of those gloves. And so the long and short of it is, too soon to tell. I'm keeping my fingers crossed, but I'm reserving actual excitement for when I can get my hands on it. More to come from that, I think and hope. But yes, every single person has asked about them, and that's where I heard about them. Since the pleasure and reward centers of the brain depend in part on dopamine, and Parkinson's disease involves lack of dopamine, are people with Parkinson's disease less likely to become addicted? Which I thought was an interesting question in and of itself. And I think I actually have an answer for that one. But then the follow-up second part of the question I thought was really interested, which is, and relatedly, do patients with Parkinson's disease get less pleasure from sex, alcohol, etc., compared to normal persons? And yes, and they nicely threw in parentheses, I know no one's normal because of low dopamine. So I thought that was a really interesting question, and that has come up before. In terms of, the reward pathway, in my opinion, I'm not sure this is studied or if this is just me making it up or scientifically thinking, but I think that it's the lack of that reward chemical, the dopamine being in the reward pathway, that really leads to the kind of lack of motivation. That fatigue, that tiredness, that not wanting to get up and do things, that lack of motivation, I really do think comes because dopamine is involved in the reward pathway. And if you're not getting that reward for doing things, you don't want to do it. And so the first question is, yes, I believe, and I might be making this up, but I don't think I'm making this up, because I was told this by other people. I don't know that I've actually looked at these studies myself. But in terms of the personality of people with Parkinson's disease, they don't use drugs, they don't smoke, they don't drink a lot of alcohol, they don't take risks, they're not adventurous. I believe this was published way back in the day, and I learned this subsequently through kind of movement disorders training me more so than reading it myself. But it makes sense, because again, if you're not having enough dopamine to activate that reward pathway, and you're not getting that same jolt of reward when you do something exciting or fun or dangerous or whatever, it is going to make you less likely to do those things. I think that's why people do those things. I don't know, I'm pretty boring myself. And so I do think there is something to the lack of dopamine being involved in the reward pathway that does affect the personality and the behaviors of people with Parkinson's disease. The second question I am not entirely sure of. In fact, you guys would probably answer that question better than I can. I'm not entirely sure. Does that mean that people with Parkinson's disease get less pleasure from those types of activities and behaviors? My scientific mind would venture to say yes, but I'm honestly not sure. And again, I don't think I'm actually the right one to answer that question. You guys probably know the answer to that question better than I do. Again, I do think the fact that dopamine is involved in the reward pathway does impact behavior, but I'm not entirely sure how it impacts kind of situations or your response to said situation. So I thought that was a really interesting question. So thank you for whoever sent that in. What is my take on Prevagen for Parkinson's cognitive issues? It's iffy. I mean, I've seen the commercials for Prevagen. I've had patients take Prevagen and Nerivia or whatever the other one is, or there's a few of them out there. Um, it's okay. I can't think of anybody offhand, and I may be forgetting somebody, but it's, I can't think of that many people or really anybody offhand who came back to me and said, I took Prevagen and wow, I can remember so much better than I did before. Or wow, my thinking is so much clearer. Or cognitively, I'm doing so much better than I did before. I mean, maybe there's been some patients that have come back and said that they thought it helped. Again, Prevagen, and we're talking about over-the-counter supplements that are really touted for or supposed to help with cognition, with thinking, with memory, things like that, which is a big problem in my patients. And I've had plenty of patients take a lot of over-the-counter supplements. And again, I've probably had some patients come back and say, maybe it helped a little bit, or maybe it helped some, or yeah, I think it's helping, I'm going to keep taking it. But I don't think I've ever been wowed by it. I don't think anybody has ever come back and said, wow, that was amazing. I can't believe you don't tell everybody about this. My line on supplements and taking over the counter things is pretty much the same for this and everything else that you can think of. Generally, I think there is some scientific data to back it up. I don't think it's harmful or risky. And so realistically, if you want to try taking it, be my guest. My general rules of thumb for supplements or over-the-counter things are exactly that. As long as there's some scientific background or some evidence that this is a reasonable idea, as long as it's not toxic or dangerous, and as long as it's not putting you in the poorhouse, knock yourself out. Do I recommend things like that? No, because I really don't have, a lot of firsthand experience with success. If I started having patient after patient come back and say, I took Prevagen and I feel so much better, my memory's clear, I'm thinking better, then maybe I would change my opinion. That's what happened with acupuncture, actually. For a long time, I had patients come back who tried acupuncture who were like, man, it was okay. It didn't really do a whole lot. And then I had a span of, I feel like it was like 6 months where I had like 5 or 6 or 7 patients come back and said, hey, I did acupuncture and it's really worked great. My pain's better, I'm moving better. And so now I have changed my opinion. I say, yeah, acupuncture's fine. Try it, see what you think. Whereas before I'd say, I don't know, I haven't had good success. So I'm always willing to change my mind and my opinion if people come back and tell me things that are really working. I'm with you guys. I'm as interested in finding anything that helps as much as possible. And so if people start reporting that this is really helping, or if I get more than a handful of people that all come back and say, hey, this has really been working, then I'm much more likely to recommend it to the next person for sure. I really like this question too. And I only liked it because I also ran into a very similar problem in one of my patients. So the question was, how can a giant eagle pharmacist tell me that I can't use a drug anymore? Should I check with my doctor? So I will do so. I also wonder how. I apologize to any of the pharmacists in the crowd here, but I have not been very happy with pharmacists, what I would call overstepping their boundaries. So I have had instances where pharmacists have forced people to stop taking their medicines, told people to stop taking their medicines. And my personal opinion, this is my opinion, is that is inappropriate. That should come from me. But I guess that's part of what they do now. I don't quite understand it myself. But my short answer to you is yes, you should absolutely check with your doctor. Even if a pharmacist told you that you need to stop this medicine, you need to check with the doctor who's giving you said medicine to make sure that's a good idea. Because I have run into a problem where I was giving a patient a medicine that really should not have been abruptly stopped, and they were told they had to, and they did, and it didn't have good results. We were able to get them back on the medicine and nothing major happened, but that is not a good situation that you want to end up in. So regardless of who tells you that you should stop a medicine, you should always check with the doctor or whoever it is that's prescribing that medicine or giving you that medicine before you do that. But I have also run into that. So that is a thing. And I don't know the right answer on that one, but it bothers me too. You have talked at length about fatigue and Parkinson's disease, and I have talked at length about fatigue and Parkinson's disease because that is the absolute #1 complaint that I get coming into the office. Fatigue, tiredness, lack of motivation, apathy. I kind of lump all of these together, but you're right. I talk about it a lot because it's the most common complaint that I get. Do you recommend pushing through these periods of fatigue if possible, or schedule periodic naps so as to prevent these fatigue episodes? I mean, I think realistically, and this is my opinion, both are reasonable. If you can push through, the one thing that I have found to be successful for fatigue, and you guys are going to, I don't care if you're tired of hearing about it or not, it's my favorite thing to talk about. It's exercise. It is getting up, being active, and moving. Exercise is the one thing that I have found that really gives people a boost, gives people energy, helps them get through that downtime where they just feel sluggish, fatigued, and tired. And so the short answer is yes, if you can push through it and you can get up and be active, go for a walk, do something that gets your heart rate up, I think it'll help. But I'm also not against naps. If you're struggling, and a lot of my patients do, a lot of my patients take naps. If you're struggling and you're tired and you just can't get up and move, or you feel like you wouldn't do a very good job anyway, and you need to take a nap, take a nap. I don't have a problem with that. If scheduling naps into your day helps you function better and get through your day-to-day life, go to town. I don't want you sleeping all day. And so that's never a good idea. And if you're not sleeping very well at night, sleeping during the day sometimes makes that worse. So you have to be a little bit careful. But realistically, I want you doing all the stuff you can and want to do during the day. And if it takes an hour or a 2-hour nap in the afternoon to be able to do all the stuff that you want to do, I feel like that's a fair trade-off. Now, if you're sleeping too much and you're still not doing all the stuff you want to do, well, then that's not a great solution. But if you find that taking a nap gives you a little bit of a boost, and a lot of my patients do find taking a nap kind of recharges them a little bit, gives them a little bit of a reset, I think it's a very reasonable way to try to maintain your ability to do all the stuff you want to do. Again, everything that I do and everything that I recommend and all the medicine that I give you and all the therapy that I send you for is really aimed at trying to keep you doing all the stuff you want to do as well as possible, as long as possible. That really is the goal of everything that I do. And so again, the same thing is true for naps. Again, if you can push through and you can get up and go for a walk and that's enough to give you a boost, great, do that. But if you find you need a nap, there are definitely worse things in this world than taking a nap. And so if you find you need a nap and that's what it takes to push to be able to do all the stuff you want to do, I think it's a very reasonable solution. All right. Last emailed question. What is the need for using rivastigmine and retigaine transdermal patches? Well, those are two very different medicines. So I'll take them in order. So I like to use and prescribe patches for my patient for a lot of reasons. One is probably everybody that I'm seeing staring at me right now feels like they take too many pills. I'd almost be willing to guarantee it. Every single person out there thinks they take too many pills, and you do. You take a ton of them. All of my patients are on just handfuls of pills, and so if I can get away with a patch and it's not one more pill, I think it's a good idea. The other reason I like patches is that, a lot of the pills make you sick to your stomach, and patches can still make you sick to your stomach, but tend to do it less so, at least in my experience. But the two patches that you mentioned in your question are actually very, very different medicines, and I use them for very, very different things. So rivastigmine patch, which is Exelon, is actually an Alzheimer's disease drug. So it's a dementia medicine. I use it in a lot of my Parkinson's disease patients, sometimes for memory, but also because it turns out there's a little bit of data, although it's weak data. This is not good scientific data to suggest that it helps with walking and balance. So we think that the walking and balance pathways, or the pathways that go through the brainstem and the cerebellum, which is the part of your brain that controls coordinated movement and balance, work more along the lines of acetylcholine than dopamine. Acetylcholine is the chemical that we work on in Alzheimer's disease a little bit more than Parkinson's disease, and that's what medicines like rivastigmine, donepezil, which is Aricept, those medicines work on acetylcholine. And so there's a little bit of data to suggest that these Alzheimer's disease medicines do help some in Parkinson's. And I've had good experiences in some patients. It doesn't work for everybody. I've tried it in a lot of people. It's not perfect, but I have had some benefit with walking and balance using Exelon or rivastigmine. And again, then I like the patch because it's just one patch a day. You don't have to worry about pills. You don't have to, it can still upset your stomach, but maybe a little bit less in my experience than the pills. And so I like the patch. It also comes in a pill. And so insurance companies don't always like patches. So if I can't get the patch, I'll use the pill. But that would be where I would use the rivastigmine patch. The retigaine patch, which is Nupro, on the other hand, is a dopamine agonist. So this works similarly to Mirapex and Requip. And so it's more of a direct Parkinson's disease medicine. I use a lot of the Nupro patch too, because again, what you guys have all know or have found out is that 95% of the drugs that we have for Parkinson's disease are pills. We have very few Parkinson's disease medicines that are non-pill. There's an injection, there's the inhaler, there's a thin film, and there's the Nupro patch. That's really about it, outside of more invasive type things. And so I like the patch because, again, it's not another pill. But I also use a Nupro patch if people are having a lot of fluctuations, or if they're not carrying through the night with their medicines, because again, the benefits to the patch are it gives you a steady state of medicine and you wear it all day and all night long. And so those are probably the two biggest reasons why I will use a Nupro patch. Again, I don't know that it's necessarily better than some of the other medicines that we have, but it's a different form. In the right person, it's a good idea to try to smooth out ups and downs or various things like that. And so that's where I would probably use the retigaine patch. Again, the two patches that you mentioned in your question are very, very different. And the general idea behind using a patch, which I like to do, is again, it's not another pill. And I know everybody takes a ton of pills, and patches are fairly steady state. So it's not a lot of this up and down, which a lot of the medicines that we use do. So hopefully that answered the question. All right. Those were all the ones that were emailed to me. So let me hit the ground running here on the chat box and see what things are going. Yeah. So again, I don't know this Dr. Tass out of Stanford, but again, I'm hoping that at some point they're going to be publishing this data. They're going to be doing larger trials. But again, if you followed any type of research, you know that everything I just said, which took me 7 seconds to say, takes like 12 years to accomplish for some reason. I mean, between all the hurdles that you have to jump through to get just a trial started, funding, IRB, which is the internal kind of review board or research board to make sure that they're okay with your protocols, to then recruit patients, to then have enough time to follow them up. Trials just take forever. And so while I am interested and eager to see what they say, I feel like we're still a ways away from getting a hold of it. And so again, while I'm keeping my fingers crossed, we'll see how it goes. Do I ever prescribe Lamictal for my patients, and what benefits could it have? I mean, I have prescribed Lamictal. Have I prescribed it for Parkinson's disease? Not that I can think of offhand. So Lamictal or lamotrigine is traditionally an anti-seizure medicine. It is also used as a mood stabilizer. And those are probably the two most common reasons that it's used. Could it help smooth out ups and downs in mood in patients with Parkinson's disease? Maybe. I believe I've also tried it for kind of jerking movements in some patients, although again, that's usually after I've tried some of the other anti-seizure medicines. But I don't know that I've necessarily used it in Parkinson's disease. Again, it's a pretty good mood stabilizer. So perhaps in people who are having a lot of mood fluctuations in Parkinson's disease, it could be beneficial. Maybe it would help with it if you had some jerking movements. I think it would be a stretch to think that it would help from a tremor standpoint. And so, those could be the potential benefits to it. One of the biggest problems with Lamictal is that you have to go slow. So you got to start at a low dose and work it up week by week because of the chance of a bad rash called Stevens-Johnson syndrome. But that's not the biggest deal in the world. We worry more about that when we're using it in our epilepsy patients and you have to get something on board quickly. Lamictal is not a great choice. The benefits to Lamictal is its side effect profile is really good. So most people tolerate it fairly well, assuming they don't get the rash. And so in our epilepsy patients, that's one of the better reasons to use it. But again, I can't think of anybody from a Parkinson's disease standpoint that I've used it for, but I'd be more than interested if you have ideas for how it could be beneficial. What are the incidents of longer-term DBS patients having seizures? I don't know the answer to that question. I'm going to have to look that one up. So I guess there would be two parts to that just in my thinking out loud. So one is you're stimulating the brain. Now you're stimulating the deeper structures of the brain. And usually we think about seizures or epileptic seizures coming from the outer part of the brain, the cortex. And so usually deeper structure lesions in the basal ganglia, the cerebellum, the brainstem, these areas do not usually or typically lead to seizures. So I wouldn't think there would be a huge risk from the stimulation itself. Now, you do have to go through the outside to get to the deeper structures. And so you do disrupt the cortex some. And we know that anything that disrupts the cortex, be it just you're born with an irregularity, you have shrinkage from a variety of reasons, you have a stroke, you have a tumor, these can all lead to seizures. So anything that does disrupt that outer part of your brain can be a focus for seizures. And so could potentially the fact that we do have to go through, again, the outside of the brain to get to the inside, could that disrupt enough brain to be a focus for seizure? I mean, I'm sure it's possible. I can't think of any patient that I've had personally who, after they've had DBS for a long time, develop seizures. I'd have to look it up and see if that's been reported. Probably, I could conceive of why that would be the case, but I have never seen it. Again, just because I've never seen it doesn't mean it doesn't happen by any means. I am not all-knowing and all-be-all. And so let me take a look at that. Let me see if I can find any data about that. I'm not sure of the answer, but that's kind of my conceptualization of what could happen with seizures. So again, I think this is true. So since the reward pleasure center in the brain depends on dopamine, among other chemicals, are patients with Parkinson's disease less likely to become addicted since they are in short-term dopamine? I think so. I think that has been shown that patients with Parkinson's disease are not people who typically do drugs, who typically have an addictive personality or a risk-taking personality. I'm going to have to find out where that study was done. I haven't actually seen that in publication. That's only been told to me by older movement disorder specialists, but I take it for truth because it does make sense. But I'll actually double check and see if that has ever actually been published. But that's also exactly why some of the side effects of the dopamine medicines are impulse control problems, gambling problems, sex problems, shopping problems, eating problems, particularly the dopamine agonists, because they don't just activate receptors in the movement pathway, they activate all dopamine receptors or a lot of different pathways, dopamine receptors. And so again, that kind of works both ways, where I do believe patients with Parkinson's disease are less likely to be addicted or have that type of problem. But at the same time, that is potentially a side effect or a complication of the medications that we use. We're new to Parkinson's diagnosis. Without reading everything on the internet, what's a good introductory resource? Well, you already found one. So the Parkinson's Foundation of Western Pennsylvania is a great one. These guys, and Casey pops up there. See, she's all over it. I mean, these guys are great. I work with them a ton. They have great information. They have great resources. Definitely talk to Casey, talk to Christine, talk to everybody there. They can get you hooked up with places that are near you. Go ahead, Casey. You want to say something?
Yes, we have a wonderful overview. It's on our YouTube channel. I also included it in the chat. It's called Parkinson's Primer, The Big Picture by Josefa Domingos and John Dean, two Parkinson's experts. So go to our website, YouTube channel on there, and it's in November. Or email me and I'll send it to you, or go to the chat box. Thanks.
See, I knew she would have the answer for that. However, they are not the only resource out there. They are a very good one, and I highly recommend you getting involved if you're not already with them. Again, they're the ones who put on this program. They're the ones who set all this up. They're the ones that make it happen. I just show up. And so they are a great resource, particularly in the Pittsburgh area. You're right. You do have to be careful going online because everything you read online is not created equal. So the other place that I send the majority of my patients to, if they're looking for specifically an online resource, is the Michael J. Fox Foundation website. On the Michael J. Fox Foundation website, they have great introductions, much like the Parkinson's Foundation Western Pennsylvania does. They have great kind of resources, introductions, to people who are new with the diagnosis. A lot of research trials are all listed on there, so you can find things if you're interested in, but really either of those two are good. And so those definitely get hooked up with these guys here. And if you're looking for another online resource, that's probably what I would say. That's where I usually send people to. Camptocormia, any treatment out there? Not good ones. So question number one, what is camptocormia? That is not a word that is well known by a lot of people. So camptocormia is basically straight flexion of the spine. And it's a muscular problem. So it's not technically a structural problem, but more a stiffness problem. So you see it in Parkinson's disease. You can see it in some of the Parkinson's-like conditions. And basically when patients stand up, they are flexed forward at the waist pretty severely, oftentimes. And also oftentimes what's interesting is when they lay down, they flatten out. So it's not necessarily always a structural change that they're stuck in this posture where they're bent forward, really bent at a 90-degree angle at oftentimes. It is more of a muscular problem. Sometimes it responds to medicine, but in all honesty, in my experience, it doesn't, not well. There are reports that it does. If you read a textbook or anything on a study, it will suggest that perhaps some people do respond to medicine. But in my experience, and I don't have a lot of patients with camptocormia, at least not that severe. I do have a lot of my patients are flexed forward or lean to one side. But when we start talking, or if I start labeling somebody as camptocormia, it is really severe flexion, like almost to the point where they're 90 degrees in half. In my experience, when you get to that point, the medicines maybe help some, but they are not nearly as effective as we would like. I send a lot of patients for therapy to try to work on posture. And that's not just for the camptocormia patients, that's for anybody who's flexed forward, because again, your mechanics aren't right. So we got to work on posture. We got to work on keeping you upright, really to work on your mechanics of walking. And then I think there are surgical fixes where they can rod you, but I don't think I've ever sent a patient for it, or suggested it. I feel like it would be a pretty severe, pretty intensive surgery, a pretty big surgery. I don't know. I mean, we do have good spinal deformity surgeons at Allegheny Health Network, and they may know more about this or some other options. But realistically, Comp Health wants to give me a job. Nope, I will put them on mute. But realistically, I have not come up with good treatments for that type of problem. Again, we do our best with medicines, we do our best with therapy, but when you're that kind of severely flexed forward, it's a really hard problem to work on in my experience. I love that question. With respect to the gloves, why does the FDA need 2 long years for approval since there are no chemicals in? Because it's the government. I mean, at the end of the day, has the government ever done anything quickly? No. I don't know the answer to that question. I honestly don't even know the process for how the FDA or any of the federal regulation boards actually approve things. I don't know what kind of evidence they need. I don't know how many people are on the board or how many people are on the committee to approve things. I'm sure they have good reasons why it takes so long, even though there's no actual drugs or chemicals involved. Obviously, they got to make sure it's safe. I mean, that kind of goes without saying. But at the end of the day, I'm not sure. And I'm not sure if there's ways to fast track the FDA. I feel like there are, especially for drug trials, but I'm not sure for devices. But believe me, if you knew the answer to that question, I think every device, researcher out there would really want to know the answer to that question, because you're right. Everything just takes so long in the research pathway. From start to finish, it takes a really long time and a whole bunch of money to make anything happen or actually get to you guys or to me. And this is why, again, I really do wait for things to become further along the research pathway, as opposed to just try it in a handful of patients. That's not going to do it. That's not going to be good enough to get it approved. That's not going to be good enough to get it out there for our use. And so I agree with you. I still think we're a long ways away from being able to see these vibrating gloves. And no, I don't know the answer to that question, why it takes so long. I agree. It should not take so long. Is sulfonamide helpful on top of Sinemet? I mean, somewhat. It's an adjunctive medicine, meaning it's a supplemental medicine added to levodopa to try to help it work better. Much like all the other medicines. So if you're my patient, or if you see a movement disorder specialist, you're anywhere in terms of length of disease, you're probably on multiple medicines, right? I mean, generally we start with carbidopa, levodopa. That's the gold standard medicine. It's generally thought to be the best medicine that we have. And it's the one that 99 times out of 100, I'm probably going to go to first. But it's not a cure. It's not the end all be all. And once you get to a certain amount, yes, you could keep pushing it up, but oftentimes we will layer in other medicines. And so there's a handful of medicines out there. This is when you'll see the dopamine agonists used. You'll see COMT inhibitors used. You'll see MAO inhibitors used. There's different classes of medicines that get added in, and sulfonamide's in these classes too, as an add-on medicine to try to help it work better, try to keep dopamine around longer so that it works better. And yeah, it helps some, just like all of them kind of help some. And so we do pick and choose who we use what for, again, based on what we're trying to accomplish, what the goals are, what the side effect profiles are. So everybody gets kind of an individualized or tailored treatment strategy, but that's one of the choices that we have to add on to carbidopa, levodopa to see if we can get you doing better. I can't say that I've used it too much. I've used it some, maybe not as much as some of the other medicines, but again, my experience has been that it's been some helpful. It's not the most potent drug in the world, so if you're just looking for a little bit of a boost, it's not a bad choice. But again, it all comes down to individualized deciding what's the right next medicine to add in. I love ping pong. Ping pong is a helpful activity. Report aired this morning on CBS News Health Watch. I did not see CBS News Health Watch this morning. Sorry I missed it. But yeah, I mean, I've played ping pong before. A, it's super fun. And B, it's somewhat active, right? You do have to move. Maybe not as much as, in terms of kind of paddle games. It kind of goes ping pong, pickleball, racquetball, tennis, maybe. And so maybe not as much as its older siblings in terms of getting you to move more, but you definitely move when you're playing ping pong. And so, yes, again, sticking to my theme, any type of activity is better than no activity. As much activity, as much getting up, as much exercise as you can do without hurting yourself is really the best thing for you. And so at the end of the day, yeah, if you like playing ping pong, play ping pong. Now, I won't say if you hate ping pong that, yes, you have to go play. This is the best idea for you. But the key is finding things you like to do. No one exercise is better than any other, as far as I know, at least not studied. And so the key to success for staying active, being active, exercise is finding something you like to do. If you find something you enjoy doing, well, then I won't have to yell at you to do it. You will do it because it's fun. And we all like to do things that are fun for us. And so the short answer is yes. Ping pong is a great idea. It's active. Get up, get moving, knock yourself out.
Dr. Leichliter,
Present.
I wanted to bring up that I bought this retractable ping pong net so anybody can play ping pong. And this is available at TJ Maxx for $10. So you could convert any table into a ping pong table.
And if it makes you get up and do more activity, I am all on board there. Great idea. In what way does Mirapex enhance how well Cinemet works? How do I answer that question? I wouldn't say that Mirapex enhances Cinemet. They work differently. So Cinemet is carbidopa, levodopa. Levodopa is the precursor to dopamine. So the idea behind levodopa is it gets to your brain, it gets converted into dopamine, and you replace the dopamine that's missing. Mirapex, which is pramipexole, on the other hand, is a dopamine agonist. So it activates dopamine receptors. So my simplified brain, the way that I view it is Cinemet is replacing dopamine. Mirapex more acts as a synthetic dopamine to activate the receptors. So I wouldn't say that Mirapex necessarily makes Cinemet work better. They're very different medicines, and I use them all the time in combination because trying to affect the dopamine pathways in multiple different ways is sometimes better than just trying to pound one way. Mirapex is probably the second most potent drug we have from a Parkinson's symptom standpoint, and so I do use it. It does come with price, its own side effect profile, which, we can talk about at a different time. But at the end of the day, I wouldn't view Mirapex as necessarily enhancing Cinemet. I would view them as working together to try to help you move better. So that's probably the best way that I would describe it. Some of the other medicines, when you start thinking about the COMT inhibitors or the MAO inhibitors, so these medicines prevent the breakdown of dopamine. Those, I would say, enhance the benefits of Cinemet by keeping the dopamine around longer. But Mirapex is a little bit of a different class of medicine in terms of its mechanism of action, and so I would view it a little bit differently. At the end of the day, you will see me use all sorts of combinations of medicines to try to help you move better or get the benefit that we're aiming for. And so I would just view them all as medicines aimed at trying to help you move better, and they do it in a group effort. That's the way I would view it. There's no timeline for the task glove, so my question is, does it make sense to try a vibrating massage glove? I actually did a quick search before I came on here, and there's a ton of them out there. Again, those, I don't think those have any indication in Parkinson's disease. I've never seen them looked at in Parkinson's disease. I don't care if you try them. That's my opinion. I don't think they're particularly dangerous. Some of them look pretty costly, though, so don't put yourself in the poorhouse trying them. And I don't think that the vibrating gloves that you saw from Stanford were really specifically just vibrating your fingers. What I gathered or what I read or listened to, I think the idea is that they're sending vibration signals up to the brain to alter the circuitry at the brain level. And I'm not sure you're going to, and again, I don't know how they do that or what kind of formula they do that with or what kind of vibration or sensors they do that with. And I'm not entirely sure you would get that kind of thing from just your typical vibrating massage glove. But again, if you want to try it, I'm not against it. Could you discuss the possibility of male Parkinson's patients experiencing nighttime hot flashes without profuse sweating? These patients would not be receiving treatment for cancer of prostate, right? Because the chemotherapy drugs can definitely cause hot flashes. A lot of medicines can cause hot flashes. But really, when I start to think about hot flashes in Parkinson's disease, and it's not just the male patients, it's female patients too, I think that comes back to more the autonomic nervous system. So the autonomic nervous system is the automatic nervous system. You'll hear about us talking about the autonomic nervous system, particularly in things like orthostatic hypotension, which is you stand up, you get very lightheaded and dizzy, or you pass out. The autonomic nervous system is what controls automatic things: heart rate, blood pressure, going to the bathroom, some sleep things, probably some sweating things. And so realistically, if you're having hot flashes, it's probably this type of thing that's leading to it. Sometimes it could be a side effect of the Parkinson's disease medicines. I feel like I've heard of hot flashes as a side effect of Cinemet. Don't quote me on that one. I might be making that up, but I feel like I remember that from some of my patients. But at the end of the day, I think that it's more, that can be a direct symptom of Parkinson's disease. The downside is I have not had good success treating hot flashes with the medicines that I'm typically used to using. And so I will oftentimes send them back to primary care doctors or even endocrinologists, because that's the other place that really you deal with hot flashes when you're talking about hormonal things. Don't quote me on this one either, but I feel like some of the antidepressants have been used in hot flashes with some success, but I'm not sure. That's not something I'm very good at treating. And so that's really something I would defer back to primary care doctor, even though I think very well it is related to Parkinson's disease, because I've heard it enough in conjunction with Parkinson's disease and some of the medicines. I'm just not, we'll just say I'm not smart enough or not skilled enough to know how to handle it or what to do about it. But it is actually a problem in Parkinson's disease. And so it's worth mentioning. And then we can try to figure out what our choices are to see if we can get you doing better. What about caffeine or vaping nicotine to reduce inflammation? So I don't know. Caffeine and nicotine have both long time been thought to be neuroprotective. I actually just read an article about how adenosine is the missing link in Parkinson's disease and how this should be an area to target, which is already is. So Norian's already targets that, but that's actually what caffeine works on as well. And so at the end of the day, there is something to the idea of caffeine and nicotine being protective for the brain. I don't know if it's because it reduces inflammation or it helps mitochondria work better. I'm not entirely sure the mechanism of action. Vaping comes with its own potential complications, at least from a pulmonary standpoint. So I'd be a little bit careful about that one. But if you want to take up drinking coffee, I'm all for it. I like my cup of coffee, that's for sure. I'm not entirely sure how much acute benefit you get from this kind of thing in terms of how it works. I think it's more of a long-term type benefit. But I think this is an area that we're still learning about. I think this is an area that we're still trying to unravel. We're still trying to figure out. I don't think we've necessarily come to the conclusion about how these things are protective or not. And so I think the jury's still out on that one. But again, I do agree. I think that there's been enough things that have shown that things like caffeine and nicotine are somewhat good for your brain. And I don't know if it's because they reduce inflammation or not. The latest webinar in December from Dr. Alfonso Faso, I don't know how you say his last name, on DBS mentioned that they're already doing closed loop DBS in Japan. I haven't heard that yet, but I wouldn't be surprised. European country and Asian countries are much quicker at technology than we are, plain and simple. Again, coming back to our FDA process and just how long it takes for things to work. Believe me, the closed loop system, which the idea behind a closed loop deep brain stimulator system is, we have developed deep brain stimulators that stimulate. That's what they generally do. And more recently, we've developed deep brain stimulator leads that can record, i.e. pick up abnormal circuitry and really try to correlate that with symptoms to then be used by us to adjust what we're doing. The idea would be you have a learning machine in you that uses the information it can record to adjust the stimulation on its own or relatively on its own. And that's the idea behind a closed loop system, which I've been asking the DBS people for 10 years since I've been doing this. I haven't heard that they've been doing it. I will gladly watch that. I think at the end of the day, you know, here in this country, we're still a ways away from it, at least from the technology that I've seen and been able to get my hands on and play with. And so I'm always interested in stuff like that, because I do think that is kind of the long-term goal of a deep brain stimulator, is to be more compact, potentially all intracranial, which some of our epilepsy devices are, a learning system that does not require you coming to my office, so I have to program you every couple of months, and something that really does take not just the pathology, the abnormal circuitry that we can measure, but correlate it with your symptoms to really give you the full experience of what's capable. Again, I think here we're still a ways away from that, but if they're doing it in Japan, that's definitely good news for us. Have I ever prescribed varenicline, which I believe is, it'll come to me, the other name for it, to improve gait speed and balance. I believe that's the anti-smoking drug, but I can't remember the other name for it offhand. I tried it. I take it back. I got a few patients from Cleveland Clinic who they were using this for dyskinesias, I believe, as well as walking imbalance, because there is a little bit of literature to suggest that this could help. And I remember I got a couple of patients from Cleveland Clinic who came to me on it for this. And that's when I really learned about it. The data is kind of much like the data in everything for walking imbalance. It's iffy. But then I tried ordering it. I couldn't get it. And so at the end of the day, my success was 0 because I couldn't get insurance to cover it. And so that was the problem when I tried to get it. So the short answer is I have tried to prescribe it, but my success has been 0 because I don't think I've ever been able to get it. Chantix, thank you. And yes, I have a computer here that tells me this thing. No, I didn't just come up with that. Yes, I have to look stuff up. Chantix. I don't know why I was blanking on that. My brain doesn't always work either. But so I have tried prescribing it, and insurance just denied it. And so again, the data is not great, and so I didn't fight it. So I don't know that I've ever prescribed it to anybody and gotten it and had response or seen results from it. Again, I think I have seen a couple of patients who have been on. Don't ask me how Cleveland Clinic has ways to get things that I can't get, but they do. But I have seen a couple of patients on it from, again, Cleveland Clinic. This was a while ago. This was a couple of years ago. So I don't remember offhand if it necessarily was effective or wasn't. But my own experience has been I haven't been able to get it. And so at the end of the day, I don't know. Again, insurance dictates everything I can do. As you guys either will learn or have learned, even though I like to think that I have the better understanding of what we should be doing or have the ideas for what we should try to do or get done, I don't have the ultimate say. You know, if the insurance, because again, none of the medicines like that and any new medicine, any non-generic medicine, and even some generic medicines, I mean, we're talking thousands of dollars. If you ever look at actually how much, and I don't know if this is on the bottle or if you get like some sort of, you know, with the thing with your prescription, if it shows you just how much they cost, but some of these medicines cost a ridiculous amount. And if your insurance isn't going to cover it, there's just no way to get them. And this is true not just for medicines, it's true for, you know, studies or tests or procedures. I mean, unfortunately, the insurance company owns everything I do and owns everything you guys can do. Unless you're independently wealthy, you really do need insurance buy-in to be able to do any of the stuff that I want you to do. And that's just never been something I've been able to get. And then I ran out of questions. That was it. And when was the last time I finished early, Casey? I must have talked too fast.
You talked fast. That was great.
That must have been, I was going to say, I can't remember the last time I finished a couple minutes early, but we'll take it. That'll give you a chance to tell us what's going on.
Okay. Thank you for another wonderful Talk with the Doc session. The next one is on Thursday, February 2nd.
Which is good because I always forget when it is.
Okay. I conferred with my friend Karen, as always. Groundhog's Day.